When you turn on your computer, there are many different components and applications that must work together to start your Linux operating system. In this video, you'll learn about the different boot options you have available in Linux operating systems. In 1998, Intel created the Extensible Firmware Interface, or EFI, to address some limitations there were with BIOS. By 2005, other vendors adopted this idea and the Universal EFI, or UEFI, was adopted as the standard. Today, almost every computer, regardless of the operating system, uses the UEFI firmware. As you can tell from this UEFI menu, it looks a lot like the Ubuntu menu. That's because UEFI is used in boot configurations regardless if it's a Linux or Windows machine. UEFI does not rely on a single boot sector on a hard drive to hold the bootloader program. Instead, it specifies a special disk partition called the EFI system partition to store bootloader programs. This allows for multiple bootloaders of multiple sizes for multiple operating systems, which is a lot more powerful than it used to be stored there. Linux typically mounts the ESP in the /boot/EFI folder to be stored using the .EFI extension, for example, linux.efi. What you see here is a PXE boot menu. PXE, Pre-Boot Execution Environment, defines how a network workstation can boot and load an operating system from a network server. PXE uses DHCP to assign network addresses to workstations, and BootP to load the bootloader image from the server. Each workstation must have a config file available in the /tftp boot/pxelinux.config directory. Files are named based on MAC addresses of the workstation. PXE, or better known as PXE Linux bootloader program, allows you to boot from a network server. The server must contain the pxelinux.o image file along with the pxelinux.config directory, which will contain separate config files for each workstation. You can also boot from the ISO image. This is where you download an ISO file of the operating system you're wanting to use. A lot of virtual machines do this, where you download the ISO file from the image you want to use in the virtual machine. You start the virtual machine, and then you load the image. An ISO image is basically the same exact thing as a media disk, except it's more compact. Some other network loading options that are available are NFS file systems, network file systems to share the bootloader program from the server, HTTP or Hypertext Transfer Protocol to share it over the web, and F file transfer protocol to share it again as a file system from the server.